Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. You will be muted throughout the webinar, so please put any questions that you have in the chat box, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be available in a few weeks. We will send an email to everyone who was registered for the webinar with the link to the recording once it is available. Okay, let's get started. Thank you for joining us for our technical assistance webinar on research opportunities for new and at-risk investigators to promote workforce diversity, R01 Clinical Trial Optional. My name is Dr. Lauren Ulrich, and I'm a program director in the Office of Programs to Enhance Neuroscience Workforce Diversity at NINDS. The participating institutes in this FOA are NCCIH, NEI, NIAAA, NIDA, NIMH, NINR, and NINDS. You will be muted during the webinar, so please type your questions into the chat box as we go, and we will have a live Q&A at the end of the webinar. During this webinar, we'll start by talking about the program vision and eligibility. We'll go through the missions of the participating NIH institutes and centers. Then we'll answer frequently asked questions on application policies and components. We'll go through review and provide you some resources, and then we'll have our Q&A. So now I'll turn it over to Dr. Jones-London to discuss program vision and eligibility.
Thank you, Dr. Ulrich. Let's start at the beginning with program vision and eligibility for this funding opportunity announcement. A 2011 science paper by Genther et al. Reported a significant racial gap in NIH R01 equivalent grant funding, illuminating a lack of diversity among investigators conducting NIH-supported biomedical research. After controlling for numerous confounding factors, a persistent gap in funding remained for African American or Black scientists, with the success rate for applications supporting African American or Black scientists about half that of non-Hispanic whites. In response, the NIH Advisory Committee to the Director, through its working group on diversity in the biomedical research workforce, looked critically at the entire NIH ecosystem, making recommendations to enhance the inclusion of individuals from underrepresented groups in biomedical research. The small pool of applicants from underrepresented groups, specifically for the R01, represented both a challenge and an opportunity to derive a targeted solution. To achieve the NIH mission, NIH invests in research to improve public health. It also devotes substantial resources to identify, develop, support, and maintain its scientific resources, including human capital. NIH's ability to ensure that it remains a leader in the scientific discovery and innovation is dependent upon a pool of highly talented researchers. Promoting diversity in the extramural scientific workforce is critical to the success of the NIH mission. The vision of this program is to enhance the diversity of new investigators and at-risk investigators conducting research within the mission of the participating NIH institutes and centers. In order for individuals to self-identify and align with the program goals to increase workforce diversity in the R01 pool, applicant institutions must include confirmation of the new investigator or at-risk status, which I will define further shortly, and they must also provide a statement that is consistent with the notice of NIH's interest in diversity. The long-term goal of this program is to make some headway, both in increasing the pool of applications and also reducing the NIH grant funding disparities for underrepresented groups. So We have discussed the diversity goals for the program. Now let's dig a little deeper into the PI or principal investigator or program director eligibility criteria. At the time of application, you must either be a new investigator or an at-risk investigator. Whether you are a new investigator or an at-risk investigator, you must be a citizen or permanent resident at the time of award to participate in this funding opportunity announcement, also what we call an FOA. Let's start with a simpler one first. That is the new investigator definition. New investigator is anyone who has not been awarded substantial research funding from the NIH. Grants like grants that are smaller, like research grants like the R03, or training grants like the K Awards, you would retain your new investigator status. And this status also includes early stage investigators. In other words, an early stage investigator is a new investigator. Please make sure your information is accurate in the education section of your ERA Commons profile. The early stage investigator status is determined automatically by a functionality that's actually built into the ERA Commons system. The status is based on the investigator's record of receiving NIH grants and the completion date of your terminal research degree, or the completion date of your postgraduate clinical training entered into the ERA Commons profile. So it's really important that you check this and that you make sure the information is accurate. The second or other category for eligibility that I've mentioned is someone who may have had substantial NIH grants in the past. So obviously they're not a new investigator, but currently would be considered in the vulnerable position of not having substantial funds in the following fiscal year, unless successful in securing a substantial research grant award in the current fiscal year. Especially for diverse researchers, the advisory committee for the director viewed this population of at-risk as a serious leak in the pathway or pipeline to maintaining previous NIH investments in the workforce and potentially a severe loss of talent. Let's take a visual look at a few examples of that risk. As previously stated, at-risk status is determined at the time of application. For these highlighted scenarios that you see on the slide, we have used the R01 mechanism, but it could be a P or a U as well. The R01 stands for any substantial NIH research award. So start with knowing the date of the next fiscal year, which would be October 1st. And the end of the current R01 support, if you actually have a current R01. For all of the first 4 examples, by the time of application, the applicant will have no substantial research grant funding in the following fiscal year, which we're calling the next FY. A no cost extension does not count as substantial research grant funding. The last example highlights a grant expiring in the next fiscal year. Even though it only extends into that next fiscal year by a few months, you would need to wait and consider applying next year if the R01 is not renewed and still no substantial funding is obtained. I have used the word substantial funding a few times, and I've given a few examples. It's really important that before applying to this funding opportunity announcement, to make sure you review the NIH grants policy link to really look over the list of mechanisms that will retain or remove your status. Also keep in mind the determination for at-risk or new investigator only includes NIH awards. It doesn't include DoD, VA, Foundation, or other such examples of awards that are not NIH. The final information on eligibility deals not with you as an individual, but with the sponsoring institution itself. Non-US Our foreign institutions are not eligible to apply. Non-domestic components of U.S. organizations are not eligible to apply. However, foreign components, as defined in the NIH grants policy statement, are allowed. Foreign components are defined as a significant scientific element or segment of a project outside of the United States. All foreign components must receive NIH prior approval. Well, after that tour de force with eligibility, we may have lost some of our webinar guests, and that's okay. We wish you the best with other NIH mechanisms that we have out there. This next piece of information further defines the fit for this program. And this will be based on your scientific research questions or focus areas that you plan to develop for this potential R01 application. There are specific participating NIH institutes and centers that have committed set-aside money to fund meritorious applications in response to this diversity R01 for new and at-risk investigators. As such, only applications that fall within the scientific missions of these institutes highlighted on the slide will be considered for funding. Many researchers can potentially live at the intersection of several of the participating ICs. We encourage everyone to reach out before you submit an application to contact the most scientifically appropriate person. In addition to that, it is a way for us to engage around the scientific fit for the proposal and to connect you to IC-specific information about research priorities, and also maybe provide high-level feedback on your specific aims. The best way to connect with us is via email with a draft of the specific aims attached and a brief sentence or two about your eligibility for this specific program. Especially for new investigators, you may experience or think that you'll have a hard time figuring out which one of the participating institutes is a fit. And it may be unclear from the broad mission statements on our websites if this is the home for you. In addition to each participating NIH institute giving you an overview today of their research areas, you can also place your specific aims or a cut and paste of your abstract into the NIH Reporter Matchmaker feature. And there you will receive helpful information to hopefully help you identify the appropriate program official. So I will start off the NIH Institute meet and greet by describing the mission and the focus of my institute, that is the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, also known as NINDS. The NINDS mission is to seek fundamental knowledge about the brain and nervous system and to use that knowledge to reduce the burden of neurological disease for all people. NINDS supports and performs a broad array of rigorous and important neuroscience research, from fundamental studies of basic neuroscience of nervous system function to studies to improve treatments and prevent neurological disorders. NINDS supports basic, translational, and clinical research. NINDS also encourages activities focused on understanding and addressing health disparities. For this particular funding opportunity announcement, NINDS has committed up to $10 million per fiscal year. And we are financially and programmatically dedicated to closing the longstanding gap in funding for diverse groups at our institute. And we really encourage you to reach out to us before applying. And also, if things don't go well with the resubmission, it's important to reach out to us at that time as well. So next up is the mission of the National Institute on Drug Abuse.
The contact for the National Institute on Drug Abuse is Dr. Will Aklin. For this FOA, NIDA will support applications focusing on identifying the biological, environmental, behavioral, and social causes and consequences of drug use and addiction across the lifespan. Applications should seek to develop new and improved strategies to prevent drug use and its consequences, new and improved substance use disorder treatments, as well as increase the public health impact of NIDA research and programs. NIDA intends to commit up to $5 million per fiscal year, approximately 12 to 15 awards, dependent on award amounts.
Hello, my name is Dr. Lauren Hill, and I'm the NIMH contact for this funding opportunity announcement, or FOA. The mission of the National Institute of Mental Health is to transform the understanding and treatment of mental illnesses through basic and clinical research, paving the way for prevention, recovery, and cure. NIMH supports research on topics that include basic neuroscience and behavioral science and translational application of brain and behavior relationships in healthy and diseased states. Mental disorders may be defined according to existing diagnostic criteria or along dimensions of neurobehavioral functioning according to the NIMH Research Domain Criteria, or RDoC framework. For more information on RDoC, please refer to the NIMH website. Applications considered for funding for this FOA by the NIMH must fall within the areas of priority detailed in the NIMH Strategic Plan and the NIMH Strategic Research Priorities, also available on our website. For this FOA, NIMH will support basic biological or behavioral research, translational research, including AIDS research, and research related to other areas of mental health science, detailed again in the NIMH Strategic Plan. Clinical trials that are responsive to this FOA are restricted to mechanistic trials and basic experimental studies with humans, or BESH trials. As only one example, because there are other types of mechanistic clinical trials, NIMH supports mechanistic clinical trials that focus on biomarkers that may provide information about physiological function, target engagement of therapeutics, and or elucidate mechanisms involved in therapeutic responses. In other words, these types of studies do not have as a primary aim to establish the efficacy or effectiveness of the intervention. In sum, NIMH is very pleased to participate in this funding opportunity, and we look forward to receiving many meritorious and successful applications. We strongly recommend that you contact us well in advance of submitting an application to discuss the alignment of your proposal with the NIMH research priorities. Please contact your program officer or contact me via email if you have any questions about the mechanism in general or about eligibility. If you're unsure of who to contact, I can also review your specific aims and help you to identify the program officer with whom you should speak to receive more detailed technical assistance prior to submitting an application. Thank you for your attention and for your interest in this mechanism, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Shalanda Bynum. I am a program director at the National Institute of Nursing Research. NINR is delighted to have the opportunity to partner with several other NIH institutes on this funding opportunity. I want to spend this time providing insight on our vision for supporting science in general and our areas of interest for this funding opportunity specifically. The National Institute of Nursing Research is dedicated to solving the nation's most pressing and persistent health challenges and informing practice and policy to optimize health and advance health equity. Diverse perspectives and ideas are certainly central to creating and progressing the innovative solutions needed to address critical health challenges that we see now and will see in years to come. NINR discovers solutions to health challenges through the lenses of health equity, social determinants of health, population and community health, prevention and health promotion, and systems and models of care. I encourage you to review our newly released strategic plan for greater insight into our research vision and directions. For this opportunity, we are interested in multi-level and cross-sectorial research that examines the factors that impact health across the many settings in which nurses work, including homes, schools, workplaces, clinics, justice settings, and the community. Observational, intervention, and implementation research across health topics and diseases and conditions are encouraged. Feel free to reach out to me directly if you want to learn more about NINR or to discuss a fit with research you might be proposing.
I'm Dr. Laura Kwako from NIAAA and want to provide more information about our mission and research portfolio. The mission of NIAAA is to generate and disseminate fundamental knowledge about the effects of alcohol on health and well-being, and apply that knowledge to improve diagnosis, prevention, and treatment of alcohol-related problems, including alcohol use disorder, across the lifespan. NIAAA's research portfolio is broad, including genetics, neuroscience, epidemiology, prevention, and treatment. Across topics, NIAAA is interested in research to address alcohol-related health disparities. NIAAA intends to commit up to $1.5 million per fiscal year for 2 to 3 awards, dependent on award amounts.
Hi, everybody. My name is Beda Jean-Francois. I'm a program officer at the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health, or NCCIH. We are really happy to participate in the diversity R01 mechanism. I just want to tell you a little bit about NCCIH's mission and funding portfolio. We support research regarding the use of complementary and integrative health, which includes natural products, mind and body interventions, and multi-component interventions focused on whole person health. We are additionally interested in research studying mind-body approaches to manage stress, mild anxiety, depression, or pain, and to improve adherence to treatment and prevention regimens that promote health outcomes. Research on whole person health can include multi-component interventions designed to improve health in multiple interconnected domains, such as biological, behavioral, social, and environmental. If you are interested in terms of sharing aims, I'd be happy to set up a conference call and discuss your fit of your aims with our mission. Best wishes with the proposal. Thank you.
The contact for the National Eye Institute is Dr. Neeraj Agarwal. The mission of the National Eye Institute is to eliminate vision loss and improve quality of life through vision research. NEI supports and encourages research training relevant to its research priorities that are outlined in the NEI strategic plan. NEI supports applications on basic, clinical, and translational vision research, including projects aimed at reducing health disparities. NEI's number of awards is contingent upon NIH appropriations and the submission of a sufficient number of meritorious applications. Now we'll move on to answering some frequently asked questions about application policies and components. First, we'll start with the due dates. You may have noticed that the due dates are approximately 1 month prior to the due dates for the parent R01. The reason for this is that we want to provide time for us to review the applications for eligibility and completeness, and to be able to get back to you about those things with time for you to withdraw the application and resubmit to the parent without losing a grant cycle if it so happens that you are not eligible or your application is incomplete. Dr. Jones-London alluded to this earlier, that there is a required component, the institutional eligibility letter. Without this component, your application will be deemed incomplete and withdrawn. There are 3 elements that must be present for all PDs or PIs. So if this is an NPI application, make sure that all 3 elements are there for all PIs. If you are at the same institution, all PIs can be in 1 letter. If you are at different institutions, you can have 2 separate letters. The first element is that the institution must certify that the PD or PI satisfies the eligibility criteria of new or at-risk investigator. The second element is that the institution must include a statement explaining how the participation of the identified PD or PI would further the goals of the NIH Diversity R01 program, consistent with the notice of NIH's interest in diversity. And you can see that that is available at NOT-OD-20-031. Finally, the letter must be signed by an institutional official and it must be uploaded under other attachments. Do not put this in the letters of support section. Include this under other attachments. One question that we get is if the application for some reason is deemed ineligible or incomplete, can we just transfer the application to the general R01 FOA? Unfortunately, we can't do that because the required institutional eligibility letter counts as overstuffing for the parent R01. Therefore, you must withdraw the application and submit the application to the parent on your own. So that's why we have that 1 month grace period in there. Other questions that we get is about the status of other applications. So for example, can you submit to this FOA while you have other R01 or other substantial NIH grants pending, or vice versa? Can you submit other R01 applications while an application to this FOA is pending? And the answer is yes to both. You may have other NIH applications pending as long as they are not funded at time of application, and as long as they meet all other NIH requirements such as non-overlapping aims and things like that. So if you'll recall, at-risk and new investigator status are determined at time of application. That's really the most important part. Resubmissions are allowed for this FOA. And as long as the application that was submitted to the parent R01 meets all the standard criteria for a resubmission, so for example, you're resubmitting within 37 months, it can come in as a resubmission to this FOA. Renewal or competing continuations are not allowed for this FOA. So if you have a renewal, if you're an at-risk investigator, let's say, and you have a renewal of a grant, please submit that to the parent R01 or another appropriate R01 FOA. Now I'm going to turn it over to Shalanda Bynum to go over the review of these applications and some resources.
Hello again. So I'll spend the remainder of the presentation time discussing elements of the review process for applications submitted in response to this funding opportunity. Your application will be reviewed at the Center for Scientific Review within a standing study section. There are no additional review criteria for this opportunity. So all applications will undergo standard review assessment. You can use the PHS assignment form to request that your application be assigned to a specific study section. However, the ultimate determination of where your application is assigned rests with the Center for Scientific Review. To guide your assessment of best fit, CSR developed the Assistant Referral Tool, also known as ART. This tool enables you to input your application title, abstract, and specific aims. Based on these inputs, the tool generates a list of possible appropriate study sections for your application. You can then review the rosters of these study sections to inform your indications on the PHS assignment form. Some of you may be coming in under a resubmission application, so it's important to provide a little context here. Resubmissions are likely to be assigned to the same study section given the consistency in scientific scope, but there is no guarantee that your application will be assigned to the same study section. Likewise, there is really no way of knowing if your application will be reviewed by the same reviewers, as shifts in the composition of the study sections often occur. Your best way forward for submitting a stronger application is to carefully review and consider the critiques from your initial submission. So here is the review timeline, which is the standard time frame for the general review cycle. Make sure that you allow enough time in the submission process to adjust for any system errors. This is very important. Allow yourself and your organization enough time to submit your application. Here is a list of resources that you might find helpful in preparing and submitting your application and navigating the post-award process. The list covers a wide range of topics, such as the early stage investigator policies to sample grant applications. Be sure to check these resources out as you move forward in different stages of the review process.
Thank you for attending this webinar. If you have any additional questions, you can reach out to any of the program officers listed on this slide, and then we will transition into our Q&A period.
Wonderful. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking around and all of your wonderful questions in the chat. We've been trying to answer a few of them as we go along, but we certainly have a few more that we can ask of our panel. All right. So as our panel appears here, we'll start with the first question is just who is required to have an institutional eligibility letter? Does an MPI or multiple PI on the grant have to have one? What about a co-I or collaborator? I'll pass it to anyone who would like to get started.
I can answer that one. So you are required to have the institutional eligibility letter for a PI and an MPI. So we also said in the chat that all PIs or MPIs have to be eligible and they all need a letter. For co-I, technically NIH doesn't recognize something called a co-I. So you don't need a letter for a co-I or for a collaborator or anyone other than the PI or MPI. And as I said in the slides, you can combine, MPIs into one letter, or you can have two separate letters, but just make sure that all the required elements are there for all the PIs or MPIs.
And just to add in terms of the configurations that they could be, you could have 2 new PIs, 3 new PIs. It could be 2 new PIs and 1 at risk. It could be all at risk. It could be any combination of that new and or at risk, but everybody needs the justification for the letter, as Dr. Ulrich has stated.
Wonderful. Thank you both, Dr. Ulrich and Dr. Jones-London. We'll move to our next question. We had a question in the chat about submitting an A1. So to come in under this FOA, would I need to submit a new application, or known as an A0, or are A1s okay? Would someone like to take that?
All right, I'll start and maybe others can chime in. So for this particular FOA, resubmissions are allowed, meaning you can have an A1 to come into the FOA itself. In terms of, where will that end up going? We have been told that, like any other application, and maybe Shalanda or Dr. Bynum will chime in with this, like any other application, you can always have a letter there requesting a certain study section, but it's at the discretion of CSR to make those actual assignments. Dr. Bynum, did you want to?
Sure. Yeah, so as indicated, I think indicating on your PHS assignment form is going to be very important, especially for resubmission. So A1s usually are assigned to the same study section, but again, that's not guaranteed. So make sure you, again, go to the ARC tool and input the study sections that you think would be most appropriate for reviewing your A1.
Thank you so much. And sort of related to a few different questions that we had in the chat, can someone explain how do the study sessions work? Are the diversity grants judged at the same time than the NI and the other ESI grants? Will the reviewer know this is a diversity grant?
Yeah, so I can try to take that one and allow others to chime in. So again, these applications are going to be reviewed in standing study sections, so will not be captured in a special emphasis panel. And for PARs, the scientific review officer will notify the reviewers that it's a PAR and any specific criteria such as the letter that would be required for this. So the reviewers would have access to that information, but new investigator applications, again, will be reviewed in a cluster. So similar to other new investigator applications from other funding opportunity announcements. So there's no specific cluster for this particular PAR, but new investigators, again, will be clustered as a group.
Thank you so much. If anyone else has anything to add, please do so now. Otherwise, we can move on to our next question. All right, sounds good. All right, the next question I have here is, can we speak more to the pay line for the diversity R01? What if someone scores within the IC's given pay line? How does the set aside work? Those sort of questions. Someone could start explaining that.
So as I put in the chat, this is going to really, each IC, just in general, handles the way they make funding decisions very specifically. And so the best way to sort of answer that question is to figure out which IC your application will be most relevant to and have a conversation with that program officer. The other thing that you can explore is that each IC publicly has to talk about their funding strategy for their institute. So you can also Google that and look at that in general. But I've already put the NINDS funding strategy in the chat.
Yeah, I was going to say this does vary by IC, and NIMH does have right now we have our fiscal year 22 funding strategy for RPG still publicly available, and we do say that although we don't have a specific pay line, we do expect to support most applications that have an impact score up to the 10th percentile and many between the 10th and 20th percentile and some beyond the 20th percentile. And we also talk about factors that we consider that are articulated in our strategic plan as something that we consider in considering for funding, ensuring diverse perspectives are represented, and portfolio programmatic consideration, so portfolio balance, as well as availability of funds. So those are all factors that are considered with respect to funding, and that is, again, available on our website.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. Wonderful. All right, so one more question. So Dr. Jones-London mentioned early on that applicants should ensure their correct identification in ERA Commons profile, but what should someone do if they check their Commons profile and their ESI status is incorrect? And will at-risk and new investigators show up on ERA Commons? There.
So the new investigator ESI status does show up. And if there are errors in the system, so if you feel that you are NI or ESI and it's not indicated, then you can contact the help desk for assistance there. At risk, it is not a standard check in the system, and I think that's specific to this funding opportunity, but I'll allow others to chime in there.
Yeah, so if you're not sure if you're eligible in any way for this FOA, just reach out to NIH. I know especially at risk can be very confusing. That's why I made that little chart. But there's a lot of different situations that may not be explicitly addressed. Like we had a question in the chat about if you're on a sub-award for like a U or a P or something like that, just email the contact at the IC and we're happy to help you out and help you figure it out. And your institution can also be a resource. So they may be able to help you know, like, am I NI or not? But yeah, we're happy to field any of those questions.
And Laura, I saw, Dr. Kwako, I saw you come on the screen. Did you have something to add to this question?
No, I was just working out with Lauren, the co-host details. So I'm just showing my face to put a name to a face, but nothing to add to that one. Thank you for asking though, I appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for those responses. We have, I think, a few questions in the chat about, is there an advantage to identify as new investigator or at risk? I think Dr. Ulrich had answered a question about, do you want to be, can you be both, or do you have to be one or the other? And so would someone like to take that?
Yeah. I can address that one. So you're either new or at risk, right? So if you've never had an NIH grant, you're new. And then once you've had one in the past, even if you don't have one now, then you're at risk. So it's one or the other. But we do not have, we don't have a preference for like one or the other. New, ESI has a specific set assigned that's like NIH wide or a payline treatment, but new and at risk, there's no preference there for funding one over the other.
Awesome. Thank you. And it seems this is kind of a frequently asked question. We get in emails a lot, but if there is a grant with a good score submitted under a different mechanism, can that grant be transferred to this particular FOA?
No grants can be transferred to this FOA. As we stated in the beginning, there are specific letters that are required for the FOA, and so we can't just switch across. The other thing that I believe Lauren highlighted in her portion of the talk was the fact of the timing of this. We've really emphasized that you need to do your homework and make sure that you're eligible for this, given all the language around new and at risk, but also alignment with the goals in the statement about diversity for the NIH's policy on diversity. If all of that happens and still somehow you happen to think you're eligible, but it turns out you're not eligible, the due date for this is about a month in advance of just the regular general R01. We will not be able to move you to that FOA. You will have to withdraw and resubmit. But we've tried to be thoughtful and allow you time to do that, but the responsibility will be on you to do that because we cannot just transfer applications.
Thank you, Dr. Jones-London. All right, wonderful. So I think we have addressed most of the questions in the chat as we are going along, but maybe as we wait for any other questions, could we go through and just say any additional advice for submitting on this R01? Dr. Jean-Francois, would you like to get started? Any additional advice? Oh, I'm sorry, we're having trouble hearing you.
Oops, I was double mute. I apologize. You think I know by now with all the Zoom that we've been doing. No, I just want to reiterate that program officers are your best allies. We are excited to talk with you. We want to connect with you about your aims. If this is not if this R01 diversity FOA mechanism is not the best fit for you, we can connect you with other funding mechanisms that are appropriate and connect you to our other colleagues. So please do reach out to us and talk with us about your aims. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's great advice. Dr. Shalanda Bynum, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so I think it's already been stated. I would also encourage you to make sure that you read the funding opportunity announcement in whole, especially the requirements for the letter. So just make sure that you have all of the information needed so that your application can move forward to review and it's not withdrawn. And good luck.
Thank you. That's awesome. And Dr. Lauren Hill.
Sure. I also want to underscore what Dr. Jean-Francois said. Please do reach out and contact us ahead of submitting your application, and also to encourage those who are eligible for this mechanism to use this mechanism. That's what it's there for. I did have somebody ask, should they apply to parent R01 as an ESI or to this one as an NI? And I thought, well, it can only help you. It's not going to hurt you, and you still get to be an ESI as well. So, you know, if that's what it's here for, if you are eligible, we do encourage you to utilize the mechanism.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. Dr. Laura Kwako, would you like to go next?
Sure, I will echo what everyone has said. I think, you know, contacting the program officer who's listed as the contact as early as possible is most helpful. And, you know, we know each other, you know, we're colleagues across institutions and within institutions and centers. And so if we as those individual contacts are not the best person to guide you, we're more than happy to refer you to who that person is or who those persons may be. So, you know, no question is too small. Please don't hesitate to be in touch. And then also too, I know it was mentioned in the slides, but just take a little bit of time to look at the mission areas and the strategic plans for those ICs to whom you may be applying, because that can you know, provide a lot of really great background information as you're shaping your application. And good luck to you all.
Thank you so much. That is excellent advice. And Dr. Johns London, would you like to go next?
Yes, sure. I think, yeah, definitely contacting us is the #1 sort of step in the process. But then internally, make sure you're getting the feedback that you need, especially for the categories of people that are new or early stage. This may be your first foray into writing an R01 grant. So allowing your enough time to really get that feedback is important. We have multiple dates on this FOA, so you shouldn't just rush to get something in. The fact that there's new investigator, there's really no clock ticking in terms of when it has to be submitted. Making sure that you're going through all of the review criteria. We're not hiding how this will be judged. It really is the same criteria of any meritorious R01. And so you want to make sure that you are putting together an application that will meet those criteria and that it's rigorous research. That's another highlighted area for all of the ICs in terms of examination. So giving the application to probably what you would call the meanest people on the hallway is always a good idea. But also, you know, maybe forming a writing group is also something that you want to think about just in terms of general advice for this.
Thank you, Dr. Jones London. And Dr. Ulrich, do you have anything else you'd like to add or?
Sure. I mean, I'll just say there's a lot of resources out there, you know, in addition to your institution. NIH really does try to provide resources. So we have some listed, I'm putting 2 links in the chat. We have some listed on our webpage about this FOA. We also do a shameless plug for our podcast, Building of the Nerve, where we go through a bunch of things behind the scenes of the grant cycle and putting together an application. It's a little more focused for trainees, but I do think especially seasons 1 and 3, which is about mentorship, do have relevance for sort of everyone navigating this complicated thing. And then we also, you know, there's the regional seminar, which is now called the virtual seminar. I think it's happening in February, but there's a lot of pre-events. Like there's a lot out there. And I know it's can be kind of overwhelming, but it is nice that there is stuff out there.
Thank you, Dr. Hill, putting your contact information in already. Feel free to contact any of the panelists here. They're all happy to answer your questions. We did have one other question come in, and we have about 9 more minutes, so I'll just try to take advantage of this time. Do you have any recommendations for how to navigate getting the institutional letter for individuals with invisible disabilities?
Yeah, and I can take that one too. So I think if the letter needs to be signed by an institutional official, right? So it can be a dean or a chair, but it could also be somebody, if you have an office of disabilities, or if you have somebody else that's sort of in leadership at your institution that you trust. I mean, I think there's, if your invisible disability isn't widely known, that's easy enough, right, to get that letter. NIH is not going through and checking, are you actually disabled or anything, right? The institutional letter is enough for us. I think that there is some concern people have if they're not sort of out about their disability at their institution. And so I think in that case, finding somebody you trust that is in leadership that can write and sign that letter for you is one way to go. The letter, you could even have the letter in 2 parts if you want. If you want one part of the letter talking about your new or at-risk status signed by one person, and a different letter that's talking about your contribution to program goals piece of it in a different letter signed by someone else. That's one way to approach it. But we're happy also to talk you through these different things and help you figure out the best way forward.
You don't need to disclose medical record specifics. It really is, you can just allude to category D for persons with disabilities and leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really important question. I'm sure a lot of people have thought about it. So yeah, and I guess Dr. Fair Madison asked, are there any templates or examples of these letters?
No, but no, we don't provide examples or templates, but your institution should be used to these. It's very similar to other programs such as the Diversity Supplement Program, Diversity Case, Diversity F31. So they should be able to walk you through that language.
All right. I'll give maybe one more time. Do any of our panelists have anything else additional they'd like to add before we close out? No?
No, I think as Dr. Hill said, we don't create these just to create things. We create them for people to participate in it. And we really want you to take advantage of this opportunity and to take our, as we open with our vision and our goal for this with sincerity. We have struggled for a long time to rectify the disparities that we see in our funding program for underrepresented groups. And this is a way to strategically help with both of those issues of the pool of applications and hopefully translating to actual awards. But none of this really means anything if no one applies. And so we need you to do your part and help us to rectify to improving the diversity in our portfolio, which helps out in terms of improving our mission. Without these diverse perspectives, we cannot be the best NIH that we can be. So thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thank you so much. Huge thanks to our panel. Thank you, Dr. Ulrich, for taking lead on organizing all of this. It was fantastic. So many great questions. We really, really appreciate you joining us live. This will be recorded so you can watch it all again as you're preparing your applications. We will, Dr. Ulrich will send an email to everyone who's registered with the link to the recording and to a whole bunch of resources and contacts and so on. So we're going to be in touch. So thank you all very much, and have a great rest of your day and a good week ahead. Thank you.